Look, let's just look at the politics of this. What the ANC is trying to say is two things. If we don't have power, we're going to make sure that no one else has power. That's the one thing they've demonstrated. However much they've messed this up, the city or the cities. The second thing they're saying, I corner, as we say. Look what happens when the opposition has a coalition. It's chaos. The fact that we fermented the chaos is by the by. So just be careful who you vote for in 2 years' time. That's the ANC's. And of course, they want the jobs, the patronage, the contracts, the tenders. That's what they're about.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again. Welcome to WorldView. This is the #1 media company where we explore everyone's perspectives on all those things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we have again in front of us in the studio, as it were, Tony Leon, Mr. Tony Leon, Ambassador Leon, because he used to be ambassador of South Africa to Argentina at some point, but he's more famously known as the leader of the main or official opposition in South African Parliament, the Democratic Alliance, which is still the main official political party. I don't know, we still have, what is official? It means that we have bigger numbers than other official
that's
parties.
Official. It comes from, I think, the British system, which we kept through various iterations here, but official means you are the largest minority party.
Right, okay. Well, Tony Leon and I spoke before, and he's very well known for expressing his views on South African affairs. He writes a regular column and expressing his views on what's going on in politics. But you have been the leader of the DA, and under you, the DA did grow for many years, and Helen Zille took over, I think. Does she take your call? Do you guys talk to each other? Are you in the Federal Council, or are you like one of the elders? How does it work?
I absolutely have no managerial or leadership role in the party, nor do I seek one. I do get approached, I might tell you all the time, why don't you go back? Please do something. But I resist. You know, I have a perfectly open relationship with Helen and the others. And on a need basis, certainly, if I call anyone, they do answer my calls. But, you know, I don't try and rule from the political grave. You know, I was the leader of the party for 13 years, long time, longer serving.
Right.
I stood down as leader in 2007 and from Parliament in 2009. And I do get asked from time to time to either express an opinion, give a view, perform some role. And I'm happy to do that because I do believe in the opposition project. I really think it is of fundamental importance to the democratic health of South Africa or any other polity, come to think of it. And that is a given.
So other than sharing your views in your columns, do you wait to be called? You don't initiate calls to Helen Zille, to John Steenhuisen, you just wait and observe from the silence of your...
Well, I have a familial bond. I'm the godfather of John Steenhuisen's youngest daughter. So I do actually see them quite often.
Okay.
But, you know, you mix family and politics. I give views. I offer an opinion. I sometimes perform a role when I think it can be of some assistance. But I certainly don't wish to involve myself in the day-to-day management or leadership of that party or any other political formation because, you know, I gave it a full go and I did what I did with what I had from where I was, to quote President Theodore Roosevelt rather pompously. And others must fulfill their roles now to the best of their ability.
Don't you ever miss the hustle and bustle of parliamentary life?
Actually, last night I was at a wonderful school. It's 121 years old called Victoria Boys High School, one of the great schools of South Africa. And it made me feel a lot more positive about the country. And so many folk, I mean, the parents and the kids obviously didn't, the matriculants, you know, I was some vague, distant figure they'd once heard of, perhaps. They said, why don't you go back? Why don't you get involved? And they liked what I had to say to them last night. And I said, because, you know, it can't just be up to one or two people. Movements require momentum. They need they need refreshing. And but, you know, I don't, on the other hand, I'm 65, I suppose, young by some standards, old,
very young,
ancient by some others. If I was in the ANC, I'd probably be in the youth league now.
Do you dye your hair? I dye my hair.
Yeah, I've got a full head. that's a gerontocracy.
Right. But look at the former president of Argentina. He's like about almost 80 years old. Not Argentina, Brazil. He was in prison. Lula. Now he's coming. He's running. Lula. He's running again. He's almost 80 years old. I mean, and people seem to love him. They had an election.
Well, I don't know how much. He's also been to prison between.
I know. Yeah, but and he calls it political persecution, like the ANC.
Well, they all do. Donald Trump says that as well.
Yeah, everybody says that.
Prison yet. The thing is that, I'm not in the market for a political comeback. On the other hand, I don't just sit back and watch my country at the edge of destruction, as we often seem. So I have views and I do express them. But as the great British parliamentarian Tony Benn said after, and he was an MP in Britain and a leading member of the Labour Party for, I don't know, nearly 50 years.
Right.
He said, I've retired from Parliament in order to spend more time on politics.
Right.
You don't need to, have a parliamentary platform. There are other platforms, and I enjoy the freedom. Also, as I was saying last night at Pretoria Boys High, my day job used to be, well, it wasn't very difficult in that sense. The other difficulties that was point out how the government, the ANC government, was getting it wrong and how the opposition could do things better. Well, that's accelerated at a rather extraordinary pace since I left Parliament. But I said to them, that's no longer my day job. So I can share views with more candor.
It's safer, isn't it?
I'm not subject to the party line. I don't have to advance the party line. Even if I'm in broad agreement with what the party stands for. There are a lot of things that can irritate people, especially about organizations very well. I know the DA better than most people on earth know the DA, so I can find a lot of things irritating. But broadly speaking, and this is in the main and in the broad, Solly, there is no other party in South Africa that, to me, represents the values, principles, policies, ideas, and offer that DA does. Warts and all, problems it might have, but it seems
to be perennially misunderstood, or is it deliberate?
Well, it reminds me of what Groucho Marx once said. I have inner beauty. They've never developed a camera which has been able to capture it. It has always been, it's always attracted a lot of flack. When I was the leader, I was accused of being too arrogant. I was being accused of being too Westminster, too parliamentary was my style. I always thought it was a very odd remark to make since I was in Parliament. I was paid to be a member. You're too parliamentary. Well, I don't know. What was I mean? I was in Parliament. You're too Westminster. That means that you debate.
Well,
then you're too arrogant because you happen to disagree with Thabo and Becky. Well, the irony.
Or to be too sure of your stance, isn't it? People don't like, especially whites who are too sure of themselves in South Africa. I think your time is gone. You shouldn't be like Zille. Zille, people would like to hate her because she's a white South African woman who stands and looks you in the eye and says, "This is what it is," but and people don't like that.
Yeah, look, I mean, there is a body of opinion says "Jammer dat ik leef," sorry, I'm alive. I don't subscribe. Look, to me, the great, and I can actually claim some authorship of it. I mean, everyone does. You'd think our Constitution was written by a million people, because everyone says, "Oh, I was," but I actually was at Codes. I'm not, I was a delegate to the multi-party negotiating process, and I was deeply involved in the drafting of our Bill of Rights in the interim and even the final Constitution. So I can claim some authorship. I don't claim any wisdom, but that's a fact.
But I want to come back to that.
The idea, the constitutional settlement of 1993, the interim and the final one, 1996, was really founded on two essential pillars. The one was equal citizenship, and that is very important. It means everyone is an equal citizen, white, black, struggle history,
one man, one vote.
History, one person, one vote, one person, you get all the rights. Doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Solidariteit, EFF, you've got the full bundle of rights, privileges, obligations. Everyone gets them if you're a citizen of the country. That's it. And I believe in that strongly, sincerely, and fundamentally. That is my departure. So someone says, well, you were privileged whites in 1985. Well, yes, that factually or historically. So, but I actually make a claim to my rights of citizenship, which entitle me to freedom of speech, freedom of franchise, freedom of choice, and the full articulation and expression of those freedoms. So that's my part. That's the one settlement issue, if you like. The second pillar, if I might just conclude, sorry, a detour into Constitutional Law 101, but anyway, while I'm on my favorite hobby course. So you've got equality on the one hand, which applies to everyone, the good, the bad, the indifferent, the black, the white, the brown, the Indian, and all points and shades in between. On the other hand, the Constitution, the settlement we made, for better or for worse, allows every single South African to exercise their rights, and that we've established, but also to make certain political choices. So the second part is that you have a division in the polity between, the party that gets the most votes and all the other parties that get some votes, but not all of them.
Right.
And they also have a right to be heard. They have a right to a viewpoint. They've got a right to representation. And that, to me, is very, very important. So,
yeah, I have 3 questions. I want to ask them all together and you can respond to them. One is, if we look at the Constitution of 1996, is there something in hindsight that you would change, given what's going on in South Africa and where we are at today? That's the first question. The second question is Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa played a big role together with the gentleman from the National Party,
Rolf Meyer.
At the time. They led the process to develop the new constitution. And soon after that, a lot of people were hoping that he would take over after Mandela. Of course, he didn't. Apparently, the ANC preferred Mbeki. But there was always this. It's almost like a relationship that ended during a honeymoon. People thought Ramaphosa is a man we want. He's a man. He understands the constitution. He understands where we are trying to take this country to. And he became president many years later. And look at what he's become. Are you disappointed in him from that perspective? That's true. Right? 2 questions. The last question is...
I'll probably forget them by the time we get to them.
I will remind you. The third one and the last one. Are there too many political parties in the opposition in the space?
Okay. So let me start with the first question. If I had my time over again, and if I had the power to change it, because obviously the Constitution was a negotiation. It wasn't one person or party dictating all the terms. With the benefit of hindsight, that as one of the other fine constitutional negotiators, Joe Slovo, used to call hindsight the most perfect and irritating of all the sciences. So, with hindsight, there are 2 obvious things that I would change, which I think the Constitution could have dealt with properly and didn't. The one is the over-concentration of power in the hands of the president.
Yes.
Whether a president who abused that power, Jacob Zuma, case Exhibit 1, or president who literally has an enormous accretion of power and never bothers to use his authority, namely the current incumbent Ramaphosa, you land up at the same position. So it is there aren't enough checks and balances on the appointing authority of the president, and a lot of the problems that South Africa has.
Well, Mbeki did also, right? I mean, he suspended Professor Pikelo just to defend his buddy. What's his name? Jackie Selebi.
Yeah, absolutely. He also abused his power. But look, it's all compared to what? I mean, the most flagrant abuser of power was Zuma, and the most passive non-user of the powers that he actually has is Ramaphosa. But in the absence of him not using his powers, other people don't or have the authority to act. So that's
right.
The second, and look, this was something that I noted at the time, and my party did, but we were not the big party around the table. We were like in the background on most issues, and that is the over-concentration of power at a national level and the lack of powers in the provinces, in the subnational unit. And even arguably in the city, which the city administrations are more important than the provinces in some ways. Right. But it's not a federal system. It's a sort of unitary system with a few federal fig leaves. Now, you can say, well, so what? Well, the truth is actually, and it's, all around you in South Africa, you've got a much better administration in the Western Cape at any level. Public hospitals, as was affirmed last week by Professor Makgoba, who said they're all dysfunctional except for one province, to less load shedding in the Western Cape. But the point is, that even though the opposition, which has managed to carve out a much better road and role for itself in the Western Cape than the other 8 provinces, which are currently controlled by the ANC, they can't really do very much else. They don't have any power over the rail, so we still have a non-functioning central rail line in Cape Town with devastating knock-on effects. We can't really have local policing except in a sort of, by hidden hand through these municipal polices, but the minister can't actually enforce any law and order in the Cape Flats, which is, run by the gangs, won't give the province or the city real powers of policing. And by any estimation, they'll do a better job than the national. And I could go down a long, long list. The ports are another example.
Just on this one of the.
So all I'm saying is, if you had more competent governments,
we're talking about devolving
to the people, who
right.
actually had real power, as they do in the United States. I mean, in the United States, you have a perfect example. You've got California, which is run by a liberal Democrat governor Newsom, and you've got Florida, which is run by a right-wing Republican governor DeSantis, and they actually compete against each other. You can argue about who does better and which has got they've got taxation powers, which the provinces don't really have here. They've got practically no rights to raise revenue, very vestigial ones. They've got different public health policies in California versus Florida.
Here in Canada, where I'm interested in the same thing.
Well, and Switzerland, speaking to me from Switzerland, which is the ultimate devolved country where the cantons have power, and nobody knows, maybe you do, but who the president of Switzerland is.
Even people here don't know, because it's every 12 months there's a new president.
And Switzerland may be an extreme example because it's got hundreds of years of history and evolution. It's not a new democracy. But I mean, it is a perfect example of how you can have excellent government without being hogged by a central government which has lost the plot, as they have in South Africa. That's all I'm saying. So to go back to your constitutional question, I would have given more powers to the provinces, because they would.
Would you have done it then, or you think at some point between then and now they would have been the right time to do it?
Oh, I would have done it then, because look, I came from a party originally called the Progressive Federal Party, was its name, Federal. It believed in devolution of power.
But that's what the IFP wanted. That's why we didn't want to go into the elections in '94, isn't it?
They absolutely did. Look, they were very, very strong. But the problem is, I don't want to go back to ancient history. The IFP boycotted the constitutional talks, both in '93 and in '96, for reasons that are now very obscure, but I remember what they were, but won't bore the viewers on them. So they weren't there to argue the case. And so, it's all very well, but we were trying to argue that case. And, look, the National Party were late stage converts to federalism, but they'd run a national unitary state. And let me tell you something else. This is not a constitutional problem, it's a political problem. And I'll get on to your second and third questions in a minute.
No, but before you get there, I want to ask you,
just let me say what I think the second problem is, which relates to the overconcentration of power at the national level. One of the plagues of South Africa, and it really is a plague, has been the monopolization of power. So you've had for 46 uninterrupted years the National Party in power, winning successive white general elections and running the country down into the ditch, as we saw by '94. And since 1994, we've had 28 years of uninterrupted ANC power, running the country into the ditch in many other ways. So what I'm saying is, without an alteration of national power, at least if you had more powers in the provinces, you could have a more competitive and arguably a more efficient system. On your second question, am I disappointed in Ramaphosa? Well, I was hoping for more. And I have to say that he has been a terrible disappointment as president. He's, whether you, I was very relieved when he won at Nasrec in 2017. I thought, well, we've staved off a disaster, because I thought Dr. Zuma would be a disaster, because Jacob Zuma, she was his surrogate, was such a disaster. I now actually think that she would have been better, in the sense she would have made sure the ANC lost power in 2 years' time, because really she's not a vote winner, whatever her other merits or demerits. Ramaphosa is like lipstick on a pig. He's like,
but surely,
sticking plaster over a gaping wound. So the ANC is a disaster. It's dreadful. It has messed up the country.
Yeah.
He still has these emollient phrases and this hopefulness. And
people fall for them. There are enough gullible people in South Africa. But my question to you is this: surely Ramaphosa of 2022 or 2017 to 2022 is not the different man that from what he was in earlier there when you guys discussed the constitution. Has he changed, or these people not really know him? Is it only now that they begin to know? Because a lot of times when you give a lot of power to people or a lot of money, that's when the real character comes, right? Or has he become compromised by other things over time that make it hard for him to be the president that South Africa wants?
Look, it's difficult to answer that question. I did have quite a few encounters with Ramaphosa when he was the head of the ANC negotiations team. I have to say, first of all, the negotiators around him were first rate. Vali Musa, Joe Slovo, Mac Maharaj, and then the people who weren't directly, but in the background, as technical advisors, Albie Sachs, Arthur Chaskelson, although they were not officially ANC, they were very aligned to the ANC. So they had a deep bench of talent. He was the front guy. There was Mandela also in the background. So he had the wind of history behind his back. And he was negotiating against, I thought, a very poor set of negotiators put up by the National Party, who really were completely unused to having to discuss anything with anyone other than enforce their will, which they no longer could do so. And he had the power of the international community, the media. Look, it was a perfect set of stars aligned for him. And, he was perfectly competent. But he wasn't given, breathtakingly difficult life and death decisions that had to be made by him alone. He wasn't the president. He was the lead negotiator of the ANC with a deep bench of talent around him and people in the background like Mandela. So it wasn't, I'm not saying it wasn't that difficult. People who knew him from before, I didn't know him from before, from his time as Secretary General of the National Union of Mine Workers, speak of a very competent trade unionist and negotiator. I can't attest to that. What I do know, it actually doesn't matter, because all you can say is what you've got in front of you. And the Cyril Ramaphosa, both as deputy president, where he literally did nothing except prop up and legitimize Zuma, and even the tasks he was assigned, like famous Eskom war room, well, we know where that ended up. Fortunately, I'm speaking to a home which has solar panels. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because there's now stage 4 load shedding. This is 5 years after Ramaphosa promised it would end in 18 months. Go figure. And he seems completely passive. I've been thinking a bit about, well, who can't think about her, about Liz Truss and her self-inflicted dilemmas, to put it mildly. I mean, the thing about Liz Truss today is she had a theory of the case. I'm going to give you low taxes, we're going to have a bonfire of the regulations, and we're going to get growth, and it's not going to cost us because we're going to make it up by huge investments. Anyway, the thing blew up after 3 weeks, tested by reality. Now she has no theory of the case. So what is the purpose or point of Liz Truss's premiership? Because everything she stood for has now been abolished by her new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, yesterday in Parliament.
Is she going to last in that position?
No, I don't know. The question is how long. Her big race is, can she beat George Canning? I was just writing about this morning. He's the shortest lived prime minister. He died in office. Now, she's got to make to January the 2nd. If she doesn't make January 2nd, she will be the shortest serving British prime minister in history.
Death comes in many ways, right?
It does. Well, political death, not mortal death.
Right.
But the thing is, she had a theory of the case, right? It blew up in her face.
Okay, Tony, you're running away.
Cyril's theory of the case. What is the purpose of his presidency? What is this offer? We know Zuma was, about state capture and stealing and whatever. Mbeki, well, we know about him. He had some terrible views on AIDS in Zimbabwe, but he stood for a kind of, a set of economic principles, which he implemented, some of them, not all of them. And Mandela was the king of reconciliation and nation building. Okay. What is this guy's case? I have no idea.
Okay, Tony, you're running away with this discussion. You're leaving me behind now. I will come back to
another question. Are there too many political parties?
Yes.
Yes, there are. But unfortunately, that is the consequence of a system of extreme proportionality.
Will you change it? Is it time to change it?
Of 1% of the vote to get to Parliament, And a lot of people seem to think that a life as a parliamentarian is untold riches and perks of office. Maybe it is. I never experienced
Well, depending where you come from, it can be.
So I think it's, every man and his mates and every woman and her friend. No one's formed political party. But look, at one level, it just splinters the opposition. At another level, it makes the case for the big opposition parties by saying, look, there were all these tiny parties, one-person parties, literally in Johannesburg, and they basically reneged on their commitment to the voters, because if it's one person, they can do what they like. If you've got a party, you can't do what you like. Maybe that's an argument.
Okay. I want to say, first of all, I need to make a comment on Thabo Mbeki, and one, there's a closer saying that goes something like, Apo amanzi awe makona, azopinda ngolunyu suku amefuti. What it means is, where water has stood, where water has created a puddle, when it rains again, it will stand again there, because there's room. So basically you're creating precedents. Mbeki, we shouldn't underestimate him suspending Vosipiko, the NDPP, to defend his party. He was the first post-apartheid president to undermine the criminal justice system. It means a lot. The fact that he did it once towards the end, it doesn't matter. The fact that he did that, other people thought, we can do that. And it became worse under Zuma. There's no doubt. I think we mustn't underestimate them. But I want to ask you a question about a moment in Parliament, in the National Assembly, which I'm wondering if you remember. So it was you there, it was Patricia de Lille with the first political party that she founded after she left that leftist party that she was with.
Yes.
Yeah, she founded, I don't remember what she called it.
Independent Democrats.
Independent Democrats. So I voted for her once provincially. I thought, wow, this is.
Serves you right.
I did. Look, I have to tell you that I voted for several political parties, including the DA. I stopped voting for the ANC long term. I don't get married to any political party. I look at them, I watch them, I listen, and everybody that gets my vote must deserve it. All right. So anyway, on the one day that I'm trying to say, if you remember, Patricia de Lille, the President Mbeki was there, you were there, Patricia de Lille stood up, faced the president and said, don't worry about this Chihuahua president, I'll deal with him. Do you remember that moment? He was referring to you.
I do. Patricia de Lille was a fantasy of her own and the media's creation. She had, she had what Andy Warhol called 15 minutes of fame, because she allegedly had a dossier on the arms deal.
Correct.
Practically nothing in the dossier, and she couldn't even make coherent sense of it when she went to the ill-fated Sariti Commission of Inquiry. But the press never asked her to produce any proof. And she was quite aggro towards the ANC when it suited her, and then of course backed the ANC when it also suited her. And so in 2006, she tried mightily to prevent the DA taking over the city of Cape Town and to give another term of office to the disastrous Noma India Mfeketo, who now happily is South African ambassador to the United States. That's why we have such brilliant bilateral relations with the US. Anyway, and and then when it really suited her, she took a seat in Ramaphosa's cabinet. So
she's not delivering on the ANC Monday.
In between, she's been in about 5 different political formations, including briefly in the DA itself. So and she's in charge of heaven help us infrastructure. Well,
when she stood up that day, that's the time I said, "That's it. You're not getting any more." I didn't vote for you to defend to oppose Tony Leon. I voted for you to defend that man that you cuddling to right now.
Patricia was very angry because she wanted to join the DA on the assumption that I personally would make her the mayor of Cape Town, and there was an artistic chap who was a sort of go-between who tried to arrange this, and I said, I am in a position. I don't run my party as a dictatorship. I don't deliver mayoralties to individuals. Because that was no interest. And then she formed the Independent Democrats. So I guess there's some personal and political baggage she was wanting to check out or get rid of. It really didn't worry me. I did my job, and if people liked it, they liked it. But the biggest mistake, any opposition politician, and she was briefly one en route to the ANC, she now is, that you can make is if you think that your job, your day job or your parliamentary job or your political job is to try and ingratiate yourself with the government. You are in the opposition. You can play
it's still happening.
But you've got to stand up to them in the morning, in the evening, and all hours in between. Because otherwise, why are you there? What is your theory of the case? So, you know, if you want to make some silly remarks, well, yes, I do remember it. It's
I was very disappointed
by
when
any
you did
space
it.
in my brain.
Okay. So I want to go back to the matter of devolving powers. We had a partial discussion about. So I know that the Western Cape government, and especially the city of Cape Town, is doing the best it can to save the people from, you know, excessive load shedding. Where it can, it does help them. But when it comes to policing, surely there are some things that the city or the province can do despite the ANC refusing to devolve these policing powers. I mean, if you look, Cape Town, there's a huge drug trade, and the people get killed, children get killed, you know, selling drugs in Khayelitsha or in Michelle's Plain, in all those provinces, townships around Cape Town. And the drug trade doesn't stop there. If there are restaurants, known restaurants, famous restaurants that are doing well, and clubs in the city of Cape Town that are known to be owned by and controlled by these underground people, why can't the city of Cape Town do something about it? I mean, is it just an excuse to say we can't because the Big Clearly and the ANC are not allowing us enough policing powers?
Sorry, I'm not in any sense evading the question. I simply cannot answer that question because I don't know exactly what powers the city has in terms of policing enforcement. I know they have these municipal police officers. I don't know whether they can go in and arrest. I guess they could use local bylaws and enforce them, and that would have the same effect. You know, the way Al Capone was done ultimately on an income tax violation, not for murdering dozens of people in Chicago. There are many ways to kill the cat. So in this case, get the drug lords and the gangs. So you might well be correct, and maybe there's more. All I'm saying is this. There's a glorified office in every one of our provinces. The chap gets paid a lot of money and he has a car and drivers and all the other perks of office.
Blue lights and all.
Called the MEC for Safety and Security. But actually, in truth, the provincial MEC for Safety and Security has got no power.
But you also have the provincial commissioner of police or something like that.
Well, he actually has power because he's appointed, the province got appointed from the National Police Commissioner. He appoints all the provincial police commissioners. But the provincial politician in charge of policing has no powers to speak of. He might have some, but they are very vestigial, they're very advisory, and they are very secondary. All I'm saying is if you have these posts and you have these provinces, you've got these structures, you should empower them to actually implement policy at the provincial and at the local level more fully than we are doing, because what we are doing now is clearly not working. Now, I'm not providing a cop-out here where the city of Cape Town should do more, or could in fact do more within this country. Maybe it could. I simply am not competent to answer that question. I'm just making the structural point, also the political point, that what is the use, I mean, other than actually in the provinces, other than the MEC for health and the MEC for education, they've got real spending power, they've got, to an extent, policy power, circumscribed. These other MECs in province are really often just adornments because the power is secondary. The power actually exists at the national level and sometimes at the local level, not the provincial level. So if you've got these enormously elaborate and expensive structures, they should be empowered to do things, and then you can really hold people accountable, not just at the national level, but at the provincial level and at the.
But is it? I mean, the DA and some people who support its stance tend to think, I sometimes am one of them on this particular point, they tend to think that the ANC is probably happy to see the Western Cape in disarray, from a policing perspective, because they don't control it anyway, and they're happy to have people complaining constantly about crime, and the DA on the defensive that, look, we really want to do something about this, but we can't because the real power lies at national. I mean, do you sympathize with that view?
Well, look, it's absolutely a view, but you've got to make the best of what you can. I remember when I first got to Parliament, there was a very well-known senior opposition figure in my party called Harry Schwartz. I started complaining about something. He turned around to me and said, "Nobody forced you to come here, Tony." Well, equally, nobody forced the DA anywhere else to take power in the province. They elected. You've got to make the best of it. But you've got to simultaneously keep, as I think Jordan Hill is doing quite aggressively and correctly, you've got to keep agitating. So it's not just sitting on your hands and say, oh, I can't do anything because I don't have the power. You've got to say, well, I am doing what I can within the limits, but I actually need more powers and they should be given to us now so we can do more. So I think it's a both and, not an either or argument.
Okay, so let's look at recent political events, storms in Johannesburg, in Gauteng. I mean, they removed the DA mayor in Johannesburg, and now they're targeting Ekurhuleni. Tshwane apparently is next. If these coalition dysfunctions continue the way they are, shouldn't we fear what might happen after the 2024 elections? Do you think some kind of policy needs to be put in place to be clear about how coalition governance functions ahead of 2024?
Yeah, I didn't read it. I saw that the DA had wanted to propose some law about making coalitions more efficacious. I'm a skeptic. I'm a great believer in the great late judge in the United States, Learned Hand, who said, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. And when it dies, there's no constitution, no court of law, and no Bill of Rights can save it. And I feel the same about coalitions. You can have a coalition, but if the will to enforce it is absent from one of the parties, it's a bit like a marriage,
But there's got to be some basic rules, surely. And the thing is, a lot of times,
basic rules, but they need to be.
Who lose out are the residents. If you look at Johannesburg, the people of Johannesburg voted, gave more numbers to the DA. It ended up with the mayor because of the numbers that it had. But suddenly, because of people who are able to play tricks, it's not you have a party with one representative coming to battle to throw the whole thing.
It's extraordinary. I mean, the woman who toppled it ultimately was this single member of COPE.
Right.
She represents 0.25% of 1% of all the voters of Joburg. It's an outrage. So, the Democratic Alliance is, I don't know, 50 times more support than she's got. She, as one person, could topple an entire administration. So I think that's a big problem. But, I'm not sure. I'm a recovering lawyer, or detribalized attorney, as I call myself. I'm not sure you can ever draw up such a watertight agreement or contract that will obligate the parties to behave properly. Either they'll behave properly or they won't. Look, let's just look at the politics of this. What the ANC is trying to say is two things. If we don't have power, we're going to make sure that no one else has power. That's the one thing they've demonstrated. However much they've messed this up, the city or the cities. The second thing they're saying, I corner, as we say. Look what happens when the opposition has a coalition. It's chaos. The fact that we fermented the chaos is by the by. So just be careful who you vote for in 2 years' time. That's the ANC's. And of course, they want the jobs, the patronage, the contracts, the tenders. That's what they're about. On the other side of the divide, you've got the opposition, which now looks, a lot of egg on its face, whatever they say. It might have been unfair. The contract might have violated. People don't like seeing a loss of power. It's never an attractive look. I mean, I speak with experience about this, not as a bystander. And I just wrote the other day, when I was leader of the DA, we lost power to an outrageous power grab by an element of the National Party and the ANC in the Western Cape. And, we were on the right side of history, to use a good Marxist phrase. And we'd done everything right and we'd stood by our voters. But, it took us something like 7 years to recover from where we were to where we finally got to, which is get back. And an enormous amount of disillusionment then appeared on the opposition terrain among voters. And the same thing, that's what the ANC will hope now, that it can depress opposition turnout. So somehow or other, it's not my job anymore, happily, the opposition, especially the DA's lead opposition party, is going to have to make a case to people say, hang on, this was unfortunate, this was a bad thing, but we are not deterred in our mission. We have a plan to make it work for the next time. You must vote with confidence in 2 years' time and make sure that you give your votes to an opposition party you trust, not some two-bit operation which can just blow with the wind hither and then thither, hither to the DA, thither to the ANC, and several points in between. So I'm not sure this thing works out exactly as people intend. These things never do, because it can also actually minimize or make people cautious about voting for small opposition parties.
But the DA is perennially regarded and pushed as by people who hate it as a very racist party, and people just need to cite the number of black people who leave and they go out there and they tell the world, oh, it was really bad, I couldn't breathe, I had the DA on my knee, on my neck, and this and that, and they go out there, they become a super senior leader of another political party out there. But now recently they've added something else to the racism tag. They've added arrogance, and I can tell you I've had different discussions with so many people. So it's like people between the ANC that has messed up South Africa to the extent that we know all over all institutions, and the DA that's apparently racist and arrogant. People would rather remain with the ANC. I mean, does it make sense to you? Shouldn't the DA be doing something to tackle these tax that people attach to it, or is it what it is?
Well, actually, I think it is the latter. I mean, I actually saw a fellow who was an MP when I was around, Patricia de Lille, came back to the DA and he wrote a mea culpa in Politics Web. He was a nice guy, and he left and he joined COPE and then he joined someone else, and he's now come back to the DA. And he describes his journey as quite.
Who's that? Who's that?
His name's Patricia de Lille. He was actually quite a prominent figure from Limpopo in the DA, and he just announced he's coming back. So, you know, I think there are a lot of arrivals and departures on the opposition train. I have always been deeply suspicious of the exiting remarks of departing politicians who are en route somewhere else. It doesn't mean, this doesn't at all vitiate your point, Solly. Of course, it creates a kind of critical mass. It creates an image whether the image is justified. In my view, it's not justified, but it's an image. And it creates an image problem. That clearly is an issue. And look, I don't know that the party's got much option. They've always been putting the race label around its neck because, frankly, most whites, coloreds, and Indians vote for the DA, and a minority of black South Africans do. So you simply say, well, the majority of the voters are black, paint it as a white party, and Bob's your uncle. You're home, you're orphan racing, as they used to say when I was small.
I tend to think this is just a theory of mine that because of the apartheid and the colonial history, especially apartheid, which compartmentalized South Africans according to race groups and residential areas, we South Africans grew up in racial and cultural silos. So you've got black people, Indian people, white people, colored people, and in those silos, a lot of stuff, crazy stuff gets said about others. So white people are like this, black people are like this, colored people are like this, and nobody challenges those. So people grow up in those silos, and one day they emerge into higher education or into professional life, and they say things that seem innocent, and they get attacked. Or say black people join the DA, which is traditionally a white party, and where the culture is from a different silo. So maybe they expect certain things to be done in a particular way, and then those people who grew up in a different silo say, but no, that's not how it works, and this is how we do things. And then they feel, oh, but it's white supremacy, white supremacy is racist. Is there something like that? I mean, do you think we're not analyzing the frustration a lot deeper than we should be in terms of why people see racism, even where people just simply disagree with them on something?
Well, I think sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's an excuse, sometimes it's a shield, sometimes it's a sword. I think it's complex, as you said. Look, I was going back on my immediate experience last night. I had this evening at this extraordinary school, Pretoria Boys High, which is 121 years old, and it's multiracial. I don't know, the prize winners were particularly black and white and Asian. And just it's an amazing school of fantastic values, very strong principles. It's not imprisoned by the past, but it's adaptive to the future. And I actually left last night in Pretoria feeling a lot more cheerful about the national condition. I kept thinking, well, why can't these islands somehow become the mainland in South Africa?
Right. Well, slowly it's going that way, isn't it? Slowly.
Maybe it is. And I was looking at these guys, I was chatting to a few of the boys and the prize winners and non-prize winners. I tried to address them both in my remarks. I said, fantastic. And, this is a school that has produced, one of the sons of Jacob Zuma's, two of the sons of Jan Smuts. I mean, Oscar Pistorius, Elon Musk. But it's the same school which is adapted, and they've got very strong values, principles, and they were all there in the school song. And, they kind of say to kids, well, we're going to adapt, we're going to be multicultural, but there's some non-negotiable values if you're a Pretoria Boys High. Look, I'm just using many other institutions. And somehow getting that balance right between the non-negotiability of core values and also being culturally sensitive and inclusive. It's not easy, as you know. And look, it's much more difficult in politics because politics, it's not to extend my Montessori's, my education. It's not a Montessori school where everyone gets a gold star. It isn't that. It's a competitive business. It's zero sum. If you get ahead, I'm not getting ahead in a competition for a post in a party. You get ahead, I'm not getting ahead, you're anti-white because you preferred the black guy. I mean, I could say, and I'm discriminated against because, I don't get a look and because I'm a white guy, even though I'm better qualified than the black guy. It's a lot of the stuff you're seeing right now around this Dischem adverts or this Dischem staffing.
Announcement, But
what I'm saying is there isn't a perfect one size fits all.
Okay.
But I think there is a formula that needs to be used. And look, the DA at the end of the day, and I really speak as an inside outsider or an outside former insider, the DA can only be true to itself. It must stand for those core values. It obviously must operate in a way that doesn't make the world its enemy. But if it gives up on those, then what is the point of the DA? It's a bit like Cyril Ramaphosa or Liz Truss's leadership. What's the point of them?
But do those values, those traditional DA values, are they sufficient to enable it to attract vast numbers of black people?
Well, clearly, sorry.
Or would there have to be some form of I don't know, loosening, changing, amending some of the values to make them appealing to black people?
Look, I don't know. All I can tell you is they've tried both. So in the last general election under Mr. Maimani's leadership, they backpedaled on quite a lot of the core principles. They were rushed in where angels feared to tread into racially charged situations in that school. Where was it? Anyway, you remember the incident.
Yeah, I do.
Was accused of saying that wasn't so. And they took the side of the complainant. They didn't bother to find out the teachers. They did it all because it looked better in the social media. And the net result, they actually went back on the black vote front and they went back severely on the white vote front. So they lost on both sides because I think people looked at this and thought, this is not for real. Right. So it's one thing to backpedal and to soft pedal and to junk some of the things, but just in the law of, pluses and minuses, you can actually end up losing on all fronts, as if the DA did.
Right. Then the DA must be comfortable with the idea that it might never be the dominant party in South Africa, at least in the short term, because those values, a lot of black people need a lot to jump from what their values are, and I'm being very careless and careful with what I'm saying, to becoming what the DA, to embracing the values of the DA as they are. So the people in the DA said, we tried to open it, but actually we're no longer becoming that. We were beginning to lose our soul. We're no longer the DA that we had set out to be. Now we're pulling back again, but pulling back again means that you become that party that a lot of people struggle to be part of. Is it? Do you see what I'm saying?
I see exactly what you're saying. I just don't think there's a shortcut or a quick fix. I do think, though, as we live now in a country in the year 2022, so we're in, we're heading towards 25 years in the new millennium, which doesn't have a reliable electricity and now increasingly doesn't have water. And I think a lot of folk are going to say, well, hang on, what is the government? They are responsible for this, but they're looking after themselves. They're not looking after them. They've let the country, literally be driven into the ditch under their watch. Maybe I've got to make a change. And I think when that point of exasperation is reached, I think the DA will do better if it keeps itself going as a coherent concern. Because I think at some point, issues of quality of governance will overwhelm, or just the basics of government, issues of, long-held identity. And look, the DA is always going to lose if it becomes an argument about racial identity, for obvious reasons. The DA is always going to win if it becomes an issue about, is my vote responsible for the quality of governance? And I'm not saying that's easy to put across, but I think South Africans, to use a well-known South African word, gutful, have reached such a level of being gutful that they might try something bold next time round. I don't know.
The DA also gets accused of doing okay in Cape Town, but not in townships. I get attacked a lot by people who think, you think these guys, you're standing with the people who think the DA is doing well in the Western Cape. Go to the townships, go to Khayelitsha, go to Michelle's Plain, and other townships.
Well, I have, and I can't compare. I think a lot of resources are physically and financially poured into the poorer areas of Cape Town, far more than into the so-called leafy suburbs. In fact, Cape Town, when I looked at this, admittedly 2 or 3 years ago, had the most aggressively redistributionist budget of all municipalities, all the metro municipalities. But you've got to ask yourself a second question, and you might say, well, this is compared to what? But anyway, why are so many folk fleeing ANC governance in the Eastern Cape and coming to the very townships in the Western Cape and even informal settlements, if in fact the DA administration was so poor and so bad and so negligent of services and of people's life choices? Because
it's a fair question. It's a fair question. I've asked that question before. And but Tony John, have you ever been in a meeting of the DA and had to say to somebody, that's racist, you must never say that again? Are there racists in the DA?
Well, listen, the last time I was in a meeting of the DA and the inner councils was a long time ago. I mean, 2009, when I formally left. Yeah, I'm sure they're racist in the DA because it's a big South African party and there are racists in South Africa. I also suspect they're not only whites, the racists in the DA. I came across quite a few race warriors in my time, absolutely. People who used race as a club or shield or even to make a point when all else failed. But in that sense, they tended to be equal opportunities on all sides of the racial spectrum. And look, it's a function of leadership to deal with that. And leadership
set the tone from the front, right? The leader has to set
crack
the tone
down on it when you have a clear-cut case. So that people actually learn by example.
I have 2 last questions before you run off. We have 8 minutes of this interview. One is, now looking at the number of coalition, or now we're going to have independents probably running in 2024. Do you think now, in order to really stand a chance of effecting serious lasting change to South Africa, all progressive political parties need to come together and create a pre-electoral coalition? So this is what we're doing. This is and name people who are known from across the board, credible South Africans, into something that will be the leadership post 2024, so that especially those South Africans who are sitting at home, who've given up on voting because they've lost in all political parties, can dream again of a South Africa. I mean, do you think the DA, maybe Action SA, My Man is Bosa, and all these key parties, AIFP, etc., should come together and consider forgetting egos, dishing egos to the side and working for South Africa ahead of 2024?
I think that's an excellent idea. I've actually, in various forums, advocate exactly that. I've said the critical thing to do is to build up a belief that the opposition can win and that once it's won, it can actually govern. And the only way you can do that, short of forming one huge political party with like a broad front, which would probably be a good idea if it could ever be done, but probably can't be done, is to actually have an upfront commitment on a basis of cooperation and actually saying, look, if you vote for any of the following 6 political parties, they stand for certain non-negotiables, they're going to deliver, and they will work together to achieve them, and they will not work with X or Y who are not acceptable or who are antithetical. I think it's a great idea. I think it creates a bindingness among parties, well, to the extent that you can do that. Results. But also it rekindles hope, as you said, because hope is the most elusive but the most precious of all commodities in politics and in life. And so I'd love to see that. I don't know, but and if I could do anything to help that happen, I certainly would. Okay.
The other question, I wanted to go back to Argentina. You were appointed ambassador of South Africa when one of the most troublesome presidents of our post-apartheid era was in office, Zuma. Was it comfortable for you to be there? And I mean, there were at some point media reports about Zuma, all the shenanigans. And were you proud to serve this president or South Africa under this president? Because ambassadors are like messengers, isn't it? You don't make policy, you implement what's in place, you defend whatever is happening at home. How easy was it for you?
Well, I've got to refer you to a book I hope is still in print called The Accidental Ambassador from
Yes.
Way over 260 pages. I dealt with that issue and how it came about. Look, I was appointed by Zuma as an ambassador in 2009. In the very same month, he was, affirming Jill Marcus as the governor of the Reserve Bank. And, I don't want to overstate my role in the universe, because Ambassador to Argentina was a very small matter of lesser concern to him. But, there was a lot more hope in 2009 than there was about 2013. I came back at the end of 2012. I am very proud of what I did as an ambassador, because I grew the terms of trade, went up 120% on my watch. Not entirely due to me, I need to add, but I had a great team.
You facilitated, that's what you do as ambassador.
I was a salesman, and we had an enormous expansion of bilateral contact at every single level, from sport to defense to everything. So it was humming.
Right.
One of the reasons I came back, and I came back a year early before my contract, without going too much detail, is that the one thing that made me, I never really had to do anything that went against the grain. And the reason that I accepted Argentina as opposed to an EU country, which I was also offered, was I didn't think there'd be any controversy in the bilateral relationship between South America and South Africa. I thought there'd be plenty between the EU and South Africa, and I didn't want to find myself.
Were you given that option of other destinations?
Of another country, and I chose Argentina.
Okay.
But the second thing was that that towards the end of 2012, there was Gaddafi was being ousted, or had been ousted in Libya. And all the Arab African ambassadors came to me and said, it's a big problem. South Africa's holding out and recognizing the interim government. And they're basically supporting Gaddafi. Well, I thought this was a hopeless position. So I wrote to the Director General, since fired. And I said, look, I'm very uncomfortable about this, and what you're going to do. And I hear the views of the ambassador of Morocco and the ambassador of Egypt and the ambassador of Tunisia, and I have a whole list. And they've come to see me, because we're all in the Africa group.
Right.
And I got back, but he never replied, usually, this chap, the Director General at the time. He was very slow, except on this, I got back a response in 5 minutes saying, oh, your personal views are one thing, but I said, but there is no government policy on this. Anyway, and I just thought to myself, genoeg is genoeg. So I had set myself certain benchmarks, one of which was the protection of information bill. That gets passed, I'm out of here, but they never passed it. And but I thought, now things could become a bit tricky between my own standing and what I'm trying to do. So I came back a year early, but I can't complain. I thought it was a great opportunity. And I also, one thing Zuma said to me then, and it happens to be true, I mean, might not have practiced it very much afterwards. He said to me, it's very important that the face of South Africa in the world is not just the face of the ANC. He said, we don't just have ANC in this country.
That's
He's
true.
quite correct. And I have to tell you, and I'm not remotely defensive about it, but let me just add that in 1994, after the election and the disaster where the DP got only 7 seats and Zach de Beer had to fall down as leader, and I was appointed in his place, or elected in his place, at my first breakfast with Mandela as president, I was leader of the small party. I used the entire, FaceTime of the president's a precious commodity, especially a president of such universal acclaim as dear Mandela, to argue the case why Mandela, should make Zach de Beer, the ex-leader of the DP, an ambassador, and it would be very good and good for the country, good for de Beer, good for the opposition. And Mandela agreed. And so de Beer became the first of many of that time political ambassadors appointed from the opposition side, not just. And I thought, if you're going to have political ambassadors, they should come from all sides.
Yeah, I don't recall that. Where was he sent?
Netherlands.
Oh, okay.
Yes, replaced by Carl Niehaus. Well, go figure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Was a man of honor and distinction. So.
Let's not go there. Do you look at Argentinian politics since you left? I mean, because there's a bit of an affinity that one develops, right? Your countries have lived in.
I read everything about Argentina. I've got.
And what do you make of what's going on there?
Argentina. I've got friends of mine in my embassy still there.
Right.
I think Argentina is a salutary warning of a country with all the resources, all the human potential, and decades of terrible governance. And it's a kind of it's like a poster boy of what happens when you ignore the rules of international diplomacy, of more particularly market orthodoxy, and try and write your own rule book if you're a small or even medium-sized economy, about the same size as South Africa. And that's why it's always in the midst of or on the verge of some other economic calamity. And the poor suffer, the middle class gets squeezed. It's very similar, unfortunately, to South Africa. When I came back, I said to Zuma, I went to see him after I came back just to exchange pleasantries. I said, this is December 2012. I said, he asked me what it was like. I said, well, Argentina is more corrupt and worse governed than South Africa. Unfortunately, 10 years later, I can't say that anymore.
No. Well, I mean, Zuma came into the presidency running from the long arm of the law, really. I mean, but let's not go there.
The people voted for him. His party endorsed him.
Yeah. Okay, a discussion for another day. Tony Leon, I really love talking to you. We could do this over a good meal, a good lunch. Do you like wine?
I do. Although I've been on a diet recently, I had to restrict my outtake. I lost 7 centimeters and 5 kilograms.
That's great. I lost 17 seconds.
Well, I've got way to go for me.
Okay, thank you so very much for making the time. I know you need to make your time to the airport and all, but thank you very much. We'll see you again another time.
Look forward. Bye.
Okay, bye, Tony. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Solly Moeng. It's been with Tony Leon, the former leader of the DA, former leader of the official opposition in the South African Parliament, and a very, very interested political player, writer, observer, commentator in post-apartheid and hopefully soon post-ANC South Africa. But if you've come this way anyway, during this discussion, it means you've enjoyed it. I would like you to please continue sharing our discussions, subscribing to WorldView, the platform. And for those of you who would like to advertise, we have a number of interesting advertising packages for you guys to continue to consider. You can write to us at worldview.help@gmail.com. worldview.help@gmail.com. You've been with Solly Moeng. Goodbye.